Welcome back for another deep dive. And today, well, let me tell you, we've got a story that's going to leave you shaking your head.
Yeah, this one's a real doozy.
We're going to be digging into the case of Courtney Clenney and Christian Obumseli. He went by Toby.
Right.
This influencer couple. I mean, they seem to have it all, right? Beauty, success, love, you name it.
Picture perfect, at least from the outside.
Exactly. But then their story takes this dark turn.
Ends in tragedy, yeah.
Yeah, and it leaves us with more questions than answers, honestly.
A lot of twists and turns to unpack in this one.
So, to try to make sense of it all, we've been poring over court documents, social media posts, the whole 9 yards.
It's a wild ride, that's for sure.
So are you ready to dive in and try to untangle this whole mess?
Absolutely. Let's get into it.
All right, so let's start with Courtney Clenney. This woman, she was a huge success on OnlyFans.
Wildly successful, yeah. Raking in millions. Living the high life in Miami.
Oh, yeah, we're talking the dream life, right?
Mm.
Instagram fame, luxury apartments, the whole shebang.
Exactly. And then you have Toby, her boyfriend. He was into finance, crypto, doing pretty well for himself, too.
So on the surface, it seems like they had this perfect, glamorous life together.
Right, a real power couple.
Yeah.
But then, you start to see the cracks.
Oh, yeah. Things weren't as rosy as they appeared on social media.
Not at all. There were reports of screaming matches, physical altercations. Their relationship was, well, let's just say it was toxic.
So there were red flags right from the start.
It seems that way, yeah. I mean, we even have police body cam footage from Las Vegas where Courtney admits to throwing glasses and plates at Toby.
Whoa, okay, so this wasn't just like your typical lover's quarrel.
No, this was serious.
And it makes you wonder, what was Toby thinking? Was he blinded by love?
I mean, it's hard to say, but when you read the letters he wrote to Courtney, you see this deep love for her, but
Yeah.
also a lot of fear and heartbreak. His words really paint a picture of a relationship filled with abuse.
It's really sad.
Yeah, it is. You can tell he was struggling.
So they tried to make a fresh start, right? They moved to Miami, hoping things would get better.
Right, a change of scenery. But you know what? It didn't really work. In fact, it might have made things worse.
It seems like moving didn't fix their fundamental problems.
Not at all. If anything, Courtney's behavior seemed to escalate in Miami.
Really?
Yeah, and there's even this podcast interview where she describes herself as toxic and says she likes to be in control.
That's a pretty scary admission.
Especially knowing what happened later.
Okay, so you have this volatile relationship fueled by, well, let's be honest, money and Courtney's need for control.
Yeah, and that Miami apartment wasn't cheap either.
No, it was a luxury high-rise.
And Courtney would constantly throw it in Toby's face that she was the one paying the rent, even threatened to kick him out if he didn't behave.
Yikes. So it sounds like their relationship was a powder keg waiting to explode.
That's a good way to put it. Things were so bad that police were called to their apartment multiple times.
Really? Multiple times.
Oh, yeah. In fact, there's body cam footage from one incident where the concierge called the police because they were having a screaming match.
What happened when the police got there?
Well, it's kind of strange. At first, Courtney begged the concierge not to call the cops. She even tried to stop Toby from getting on the elevator with her.
So she was trying to cover it up.
It seems that way, but then when the officers arrived, she flipped the script completely. She acted like she was the one who wanted them there, like she was the victim.
That's really manipulative, like she was trying to control the narrative before Toby could say anything.
Exactly. And get this, she actually demanded a restraining order against Toby.
Whoa, really? But her reasons, they were all over the place, weren't they? Like she was just grasping at straws.
Yeah, it was a lot of back and forth, a lot of contradictions. The police were probably scratching their heads.
Yeah, I bet. So with all this tension building up, what happened next?
Well, just one day after that police encounter, things took a very, very dark turn. On April 3rd, 2022, a 911 call was made from their apartment. And it was chilling.
This is the call where Toby can be heard saying, "I'm going to die."
Yeah, you can hear the fear in his voice. He's telling Courtney that he can't feel his arm, that he's dying.
He'd been stabbed, right?
Yes, in the chest. It was a horrific scene.
I can't even imagine what was going through their minds in those moments.
When the police arrived, they found Toby bleeding profusely, with Courtney holding him. It was chaotic. They rushed him to the hospital, but
he didn't make it.
No, he died from his injuries. And that's when the story takes another sharp turn.
What happened?
Courtney was taken in for questioning. And you know what she said?
Let me guess. She claimed self-defense.
You got it. During a long interrogation, she told this rambling, often contradictory story about how Toby had attacked her and she threw a knife at him from like 10 feet away in self-defense.
Come on, throwing a knife from 10 feet away and it hits him directly in the chest. That's a tough sell.
You would think so, right? But for some reason, the investigators initially believed her story. They concluded it was a case of domestic violence and that Courtney acted in self-defense. And get this.
What?
She was released without charges.
Wait, seriously? They just let her go?
Yeah, I know. It's hard to believe.
After all that, a man is dead and she just walks free.
It sparked a huge outrage, especially from Toby's family, who were determined to get justice. They knew there was more to this story than Courtney was letting on.
So while Toby's family is grieving and trying to make sense of it all, what's Courtney doing?
Well, this is where things get really strange. Instead of laying low, she goes on a spending spree, leaves Miami, buys a luxury house in Texas. She even transferred large sums of money to her father's account.
Wow, it's like she was trying to distance herself from the whole situation, both physically and financially.
Exactly. But while Courtney was seemingly moving on, Toby's family wasn't giving up. They hired a lawyer and started digging deeper.
And what did they find?
Well, a lot of it came from Toby himself. All those letters and text messages he wrote, remember?
Yeah.
Well, they painted a very different picture than what Courtney was saying. They revealed a pattern of abuse. Toby would often write about being scared, heartbroken over her actions.
So his own words became evidence against her.
Exactly. And then there was the medical examiner's report. It said that the type of wound Toby had, the stab wound to the chest, it wasn't consistent with a knife thrown from a distance. It had to have been up close.
Ah, so that blows her whole story out of the water.
Yep. Plus, elevator footage surfaced showing Courtney physically attacking Toby in the weeks leading up to his death. And then, get this, they found secret recordings that Toby had made.
Wait, secret recordings?
Yeah, and on these recordings, you can hear Courtney verbally and racially abusing Toby.
Oh, wow, that's awful.
Yeah.
So that pretty much destroys her self-defense claim.
It does. It became pretty clear that she was the aggressor in the relationship.
So what happened next? With all this new evidence, did they go after Courtney again?
They did. On August 10th, 2022, almost 4 months after Toby died, she was finally arrested and charged with second-degree murder.
So Toby's family, they finally saw some movement towards justice.
It was a long time coming.
What about Courtney? Did she try to fight the charges?
Oh, absolutely. Her lawyers, they tried everything. They filed motions to block evidence from being released, saying it would taint the jury. They even tried to suppress those secret recordings.
Did it work?
Nope. The judge denied all of it. The evidence was just too strong.
Makes sense. So what happened then?
Well, while she was waiting for trial, her lawyers tried to get her released on bond.
But the judge said no.
He denied it, said she was a flight risk.
I mean, after she bought that house and transferred all that money, I'm not surprised.
Right. The judge definitely took that into consideration.
So Courtney remained in jail, waiting for her trial. And what about the trial? Any updates?
Well, it was supposed to happen in 2023, but there have been some delays. So as of now, it's still pending.
Wow, that must be incredibly frustrating for Toby's family.
Oh, I'm sure it is. But they seem determined to see this through.
I can only imagine. So if she's found guilty, what are we looking at here?
Well, for second-degree murder in Florida, it could be a life sentence with at least 16 years and 9 months behind bars.
That's a serious sentence.
It is. And with all the evidence against her, it's a very real possibility. But of course, it all comes down to the jury.
Right. This case, it's really gotten a lot of attention. Why do you think that is?
I think it's a lot of things. You have the whole influencer angle, the glamorous lifestyle, the millions of followers. People are just drawn to that.
It's like peeking behind the curtain, right? Seeing the reality behind the perfectly curated online persona.
Exactly. And then you have the tragedy, the violence, the questions about domestic abuse. It makes people wonder, how could this happen?
It's a story that really makes you question everything you see online.
It does. It reminds us that those picture-perfect lives we see on social media, they're not always what they seem.
And that behind the facade of wealth and popularity, there can be a lot of darkness.
Unfortunately, that's true. This case is a reminder that domestic violence can happen to anyone, no matter how perfect their life might look from the outside.
It's a sobering thought. So as we wait for the trial to start, what are some key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think the biggest one is that domestic violence doesn't discriminate. It can happen in any relationship, regardless of social status or income. And it's important to recognize the signs and seek help if you or someone you know is experiencing it.
And what about the role of social media in all of this? It's played a huge part in this case, hasn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, it's how we know about Courtney and Toby in the first place, but it's also provided a lot of evidence. The elevator footage, the recordings, the social media posts, it's all part of the puzzle.
It's almost like a digital trail of breadcrumbs leading to the truth.
That's a good way to put it.
But it also shows how social media can be used to manipulate and control the narrative.
Right. This case highlights the importance of being critical thinkers when we're online. Don't just accept everything at face value. Question what you see, look for evidence, and form your own opinions.
Well said. It's clear that this case is far from over, and we'll be keeping a close eye on any developments.
Absolutely. There are still a lot of unanswered questions, and the trial will hopefully shed some light on what really happened.
Until then, it's a case that will continue to spark debate and raise important questions about domestic abuse, social media, and the complexities of justice in the digital age.
It's wild, right? I mean, this case, it really makes you think about how much we don't know about the people we follow online.
It's true. Especially with influencers. They present this perfect image. What's going on behind the scenes, who knows?
Exactly. So with all this evidence piling up against Courtney, what's her defense? I mean, how are they even trying to fight this?
Well, they're sticking to the self-defense story.
Really? They're going with that. Yep. They're saying that Courtney was the real victim, that Toby was abusive towards her, that she was terrified for her life that night.
But I mean, come on, with all the evidence that's come out, all the recordings, the witness statements.
I know it seems like a long shot, but their strategy is to paint her as a vulnerable woman trapped in a toxic relationship.
So they're trying to flip the script, make her the victim.
Exactly. And they're going to try to poke holes in the prosecution's case, question the witnesses, the whole 9 yards.
So it'll be a battle of narratives then.
Pretty much. The prosecution has a strong case. Don't get me wrong. They've got a mountain of evidence. But the defense, they'll try to create doubt, raise questions in the jurors' minds.
It's going to be fascinating to see how this all plays out in court. 12 jurors will have to decide who they believe, whose story they buy.
And those are some serious stakes, right? We're talking about a potential life sentence for Courtney and justice for Toby's family.
Absolutely. This whole case, it really underscores how difficult it can be to prove abuse in court.
It does. Domestic violence often happens behind closed doors. Victims are scared to speak out, afraid of the repercussions.
And in Toby's case, those letters and recordings, they were crucial pieces of evidence. But tragically, they only came to light after he was gone.
It's a heartbreaking reminder that we need to do better. We need to support victims, encourage them to come forward, and make it easier to hold abusers accountable.
Couldn't agree more. We need to create a system where victims feel safe and empowered to speak out.
Absolutely. We need to change the narrative, challenge those power dynamics that allow abuse to flourish.
Well said. So we've gone from this picture-perfect influencer couple to a deep dive into domestic violence and the intricacies of the legal system. It's been quite a journey.
It has. It really makes you think about the complexities of human relationships and the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface.
As we wrap up this part of the deep dive, do you have any final thoughts for our listeners?
I think it's crucial to remember that beyond all the headlines, the social media buzz, there are real people whose lives have been irrevocably changed. Toby's family is still grieving, and Courtney is facing serious consequences.
This case is a stark reminder that actions have consequences, and violence leaves a devastating impact.
It does. And while we wait for the legal process to play out, let's use this as an opportunity to reflect on our own relationships, to be aware of the signs of abuse, and to work towards creating a world where everyone feels safe and respected.
It's crazy how this whole thing is played out so publicly, right? It's like a real-life soap opera with all the drama and twists and turns.
Yeah, the influencer aspect definitely adds another layer to it. People are already invested in their lives, following them online, and then this whole tragedy unfolds. It's captivated the public's attention.
It's like watching a train wreck, you know? You can't look away.
And the fact that so much of it is played out on social media with all the videos, the posts, the comments, it just adds fuel to the fire.
It's like a modern-day Greek tragedy, you know? Larger-than-life characters, love, betrayal, violence, it's all there.
Yeah, you're right. It's got that Shakespearean quality to it, but with a digital twist. So with the trial still pending, what's the current state of things?
Well, Courtney's defense team, they're trying to chip away at the prosecution's case, trying to create doubt, you know?
Classic defense strategy.
Yeah, exactly. So they're arguing that the evidence is being misinterpreted, that the witnesses aren't reliable, that kind of thing.
Trying to poke holes wherever they can.
Exactly. But with all the evidence against her, do they really have a chance?
It's hard to say. The prosecution definitely has a strong case. They've got a mountain of evidence. But a skilled defense team can be very persuasive.
So what are some of the key arguments that the defense is making?
Well, they're really emphasizing the turbulent nature of Courtney and Toby's relationship, pointing to instances where Toby was allegedly the aggressor.
Ah, so they're trying to shift the focus, make it seem like both parties were to blame.
Exactly. They want to create a narrative where Courtney's actions, while tragic, were a response to abuse she endured.
But doesn't the evidence contradict that? I mean, the recordings, Toby's letters, they all paint a pretty clear picture of who the abuser was.
They do. Those recordings are especially damning. You can hear Courtney being verbally and racially abusive towards Toby. It's hard to spin that.
So what are they saying about those recordings?
Well, they're trying to argue that those were isolated incidents taken out of context, but it's a tough sell.
It sounds like an uphill battle for the defense, to say the least.
It definitely is. But regardless of the outcome of the trial, this case has already sparked a lot of important conversations.
About domestic violence, the role of social media, and the challenges of seeking justice in the digital age.
Exactly. It's a reminder that domestic violence can happen to anyone, no matter how wealthy or popular they seem.
And that we need to be more aware of the signs, and we need to support victims and hold abusers accountable.
Absolutely. This case has also shown how social media can be both a tool for exposing abuse and a platform for manipulating public perception.
It's a double-edged sword, that's for sure. So as we wrap up this deep dive, any final thoughts for our listeners?
I think it's crucial to remember that behind all the headlines, the social media frenzy, there are real people whose lives have been deeply affected by this tragedy.
Toby's family, who lost a son and a brother. Courtney, who's facing a potential life sentence.
It's a sobering reminder that actions have consequences and that violence leaves a lasting impact on everyone involved.
Well said. And while we wait for the legal system to run its course, let's use this case as a reminder to be more aware, more compassionate, and more proactive in addressing the issue of domestic violence.
Absolutely. We can all play a role in creating a safer and more just world.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the complex and disturbing case of Courtney Clenney and Christian Obumseli. It's a story that raises a lot of important questions, and we encourage you to continue exploring and forming your own conclusions. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.